Welcome to this 7th episode of the Shift English podcast. I am glad to be joining you again after 2 weeks. I had planned to make the website better, more interactive for you, the English learner, to make it all singing, all dancing, as we say in English, which is a familiar way of saying to make something really super, really incredible, capable of doing everything. But the reality is that I did not make the website all singing, all dancing. I made it a little bit better, and then I used the extra time renovating a bedroom. I was painting the walls, painting the ceiling, covering up the holes in the wall. So nothing at all to do with the website. I am still committed to making the website better, to making it more useful to people learning English. But, sometimes life gets in the way of our project. Sometimes unexpected things happen in life that takes up our time. So I wasn't as effective as I had planned. And as an ex-engineer, I still highly value efficiency. Sometimes when we don't live up to our own expectations, when we don't meet the goals or objectives we set for ourselves, it can create an uneasy feeling. It can make us feel uneasy about not doing what we believe in or what we value. There exists a more technical term for this, known as cognitive dissonance. Naturally, I am simplifying and exaggerating things a little, but in my example, I value efficiency, and yet I did not do things very efficiently. Thus, I created in myself some cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance happens when you think one thing but do another thing, and it makes you feel uncomfortable inside. In my example, not a big deal. I can just be more efficient next week and I'll feel alright about it. But if we repeatedly do something that doesn't align with our values, then that cognitive dissonance can turn into a bit of a monster. It can lead to us feeling unhappy, depressed, or burnt out, lacking energy and motivation. And if it gets to that stage, well, we are probably going to need to see a therapist. Those professionals that help you talk about your feelings, thoughts, and problems, and ultimately, hopefully, help you feel better and overcome any hurdles, overcome any challenges. Of course, cognitive dissonance is just one of the many possible reasons why we may decide to go see a therapist. There are really so many possibilities why at different points in our life we may want to feel better inside or understand ourselves more. But the interesting point is that regardless of the reason, many of us are now turning to artificial intelligence, or AI, as an option for processing those feelings, thoughts, and problems instead of traditional therapy. But How realistic is it that AI will actually replace traditional therapy options? Is this something to be feared? Is it potentially a good thing? All questions we will explore on today's episode of Shift English, while hopefully learning a few new English words and phrases along the way. So, when you are ready, settle back into the therapy chair, take a deep breath, and let's explore this topic together. I am not a trained mental health worker, and I am not advocating for or against using AI in therapy, which means I am not arguing or trying to convince anyone that AI for therapy is good or bad. Those are my two caveats for today's episode. Those are the two things you should know before listening. I find the subject interesting, and it is no longer just an abstract topic. It is no longer just theoretical. A science research paper done in Australia in 2024 found that around 28% of people surveyed had used AI chatbots for mental health support, and around 43% of the mental health professionals used it to help them in their work. That last fact is particularly surprising to me. That means that the therapists, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, to name three of the big professions that make up the world of mental health professionals, nearly half of these people use AI to help them in their work. I read that, I interpret that as meaning that even if we see a therapist face to face, in a way, there is a very high chance that the help we receive is in some way influenced by AI. We are often receiving AI-aided therapy if we like it or not. I wonder if one day in the future, certain professionals will have a no AI label if they avoid using all AI. Kind of like how when we buy food in the supermarket, we often look for certain no something labels. You know, food that says no pesticides, no sugar, that kind of thing. One day, maybe, certain therapists will use a label no AI. Yeah, and then charge probably 30% more for the services. Sometimes I feel like we end up paying for what is left out more than we pay for what is put in. Anyway, I am getting off track, meaning I am getting distracted by my ideas. The point is, AI is already being used for therapy by patients and by the professionals, and it is only getting more popular. I am not saying anything too shocking, I imagine. In the next section, we will take a look at some of the ways AI is helping in therapy and in some of the ways it may be concerning. Remember, the full transcript of this episode, along with a list of vocabulary, is available for free over at my website, shiftenglish.com. Perhaps one of the most obvious advantages to an AI therapist is its availability. We just need access to a computer and internet. After that, it's free and we don't need to go anywhere, and that's no small thing. When I was growing up, when I was in my late teens and my early 20s, I was going through a rough spot. Going through a rough spot in English means you are experiencing a difficult time in your life. It can be because of external circumstances, like you lost your job or something like that, or it can be because of internal feelings or thoughts. And often, it can be the two at the same time, of course. For me, like many people at the start of adulthood, I was feeling lost. I wasn't feeling great on the inside, and after several months of that, I decided I wanted to go see a therapist. Except it wasn't so easy. I was living in rural Scotland and wasn't earning an adult income. I booked an appointment anyway, nearly 1 hour away. On the day of the appointment, I borrowed a car because public transport to get there was not an option. I double-checked my bank account to see if I had enough to pay for the session, because therapy is expensive, and I drove out to see the therapist. And you know what? She had double booked me on accident and wouldn't be able to see me that day. In retrospect, which means in looking back at the event, I can see it wasn't such a big deal. People get double booked all the time on accident. The people taking our bookings or our reservations make mistakes and put two people for the same time slot when there is only space for one. That is what it means to get double booked. I could have just made an appointment for another day, but at the time, it was a big deal for me. It had taken a lot of emotional energy to make the appointment, decide to spend the money, and get there to the appointment. And when it was double booked, I just took it as a sign that I wasn't going to see that therapist. And since I didn't really have any other options, I just didn't see a therapist at that time. This was around 15 years ago. Had AI therapy through chatbots been an option at that time, I would have used it. When something is easily accessible, we can describe that in English as having a low barrier. It is used mostly for things that are a little abstract as opposed to literal. You wouldn't say that a park, which is in the middle of the city, is a low barrier park because it is easy to get to. That would be weird to say. But for example, a business that is easy to start because it doesn't require much money, like an Instagram business, we could say that is a low barrier to entry type business. And with AI therapy chatbots, we can say that it has a low barrier to use. No need to save a bunch of money, drive somewhere, and talk to a person face to face. This low barrier to having some kind of therapy is really important. There was a study I read that said nearly 50% of Americans are unable to access traditional therapy. I'll put a link in the transcript at ShiftEnglish.com if you want to check that out. But 50%, that's really high. And that is the USA. Imagine how inaccessible therapy might be in poorer countries. For many, this question of whether AI can replace traditional therapists is a moot question. M-O-O-T. Not to be confused with the other more common English word mute, spelled M-U-T-E. Actually, a lot of native English speakers get this confused, but essentially, a moot question is a question that is not important to discuss because it won't change anything. And so you see, whether or not AI will replace traditional therapy is a moot question because a lot of people don't have access to a regular traditional therapist anyway. Honestly, I find this last point the most compelling reason for why AI therapy could be a good option for some people. For the most part, we realize as a society now that mental health is important, and that seeing a therapist when we are in mental distress is essential. Yet in most countries, and I can confirm that this is both the case in the United Kingdom and the United States, we have not created a system that allows everyone to have regular access to a face-to-face traditional therapist, regardless of where they live or how much money they have. I personally feel that for those who would otherwise have no therapy at all, that an AI chatbot is better than nothing. I assume the chatbot to be well designed, of course, for the purpose. And there are some studies out there showing that AI chatbots, specifically designed with therapy in mind, have been shown to help people suffering from certain mental disorders, such as depression or extreme anxiety. Again, I'll put a link at shiftenglish.com for an example of that. Interestingly, the lack of actual human interaction in therapy is not only viewed as a negative. That is to say, there are those that make an argument that robots or AI may have significant advantages in the quality of therapy they can provide. Let me explain. Human therapists are, well, human. They are professionally trained to make their patients feel safe and not judged so they can open up. But we, as the patients, cannot ignore the fact that in front of us is a human. Therefore, we are constantly evaluating whether or not the person is reacting to what we are saying. This means we may interpret certain body language and face signals of our therapist as a sign of something deeper. We may think that the turn of the eyes was because what we said made the therapist feel uncomfortable, or that the way the therapist turned their body is because we are boring them. There are many ways we may correctly or incorrectly interpret how another human is reacting to what we are saying, and not just by their body and face signals. We may also negatively react to something the therapist says, in part because it is another human that said it. I think this is perhaps made clearer in a story. If we imagine Paul, a man going to see a human therapist about the anxiety he has been feeling at work. Paul tells his therapist, "When I think about going to work, I get knots in my belly and I feel really anxious." The therapist smiles and nods, encouraging Paul to continue. So far, so good, so Paul continues. "Sometimes I just pretend to understand things to avoid looking stupid." And this time, the therapist responds by saying, That sounds a little dishonest, don't you think?" Paul freezes. He hadn't meant it like that. He wasn't trying to lie. But now he feels embarrassed. He continues the session with the therapist, but inside he feels like they think I am a bad person. He leaves the therapy session feeling worse than when he entered and makes a decision to be careful about what he says in therapy the next time. Well, anyway, a simple story, and I hope you enjoyed my accents at least. But the point is that it isn't really that Paul or the therapist did anything deliberately wrong in this situation. It is just they are humans. This is contrasted to AI. There are no looks, no pauses, no face reactions to interpret. And so we are far less likely to feel judged. And if we do feel judged, it is perhaps easier to shrug off, to let go of quicker, because it is, after all, just a robot. Feeling less judged, we are more likely to open up quicker, to communicate more honestly about what is bothering us, and therefore get to the root of the issue far quicker. And this can be especially important around sensitive topics that we feel uncomfortable sharing with another human, even a trained professional. But as I mentioned, it is not all positive not having a human in front of us in therapy. There are disadvantages to AI therapy, and it is apparently also possible to feel judged by AI chatbots. So, as we will see, things aren't so simple in chatbot therapy land. To understand what makes AI therapy ineffective or even dangerous, we need to first understand what makes a good human therapist, well, good. Here are some ways I found how a good therapist was defined as. Firstly, a good therapist treats every patient equally. They don't care about their patient's age, background, or problems. They believe that each patient deserves the same care and respect. Secondly, a good therapist shows empathy. They listen with understanding and try to feel what the patient feels. It is about perspective, about seeing the world and the problem from the point of view of the patient. Like this, they can be better at understanding and helping. Thirdly, a good therapist avoids judging or shaming a patient for having a mental health condition or a certain problem, just like we were talking about in the last section. Fourth, a good therapist also knows how to keep people safe. They do not encourage harmful ideas like suicidal thoughts or beliefs that are not based in reality. And they have to be skilled to see when someone is thinking about hurting themselves. And finally, a good therapist knows when to challenge a patient's thinking. This doesn't mean arguing. It means gently asking questions that help the patient see things in a new way or notice unhealthy patterns, with the goal of helping break certain thought patterns and create new, more healthy ones. Okay, so if that's the idea of a good human therapist, what doesn't quite work with a robot therapist? What are the potential shortfalls of AI therapy? Well, it turns out that AI chatbots are not very unbiased in the way we think they might be. Or put another way, AI chatbots have a tendency to stigmatize certain mental illnesses more than we think. AI chatbots, even the newest therapy models, were found to judge people with certain mental conditions, such as alcoholism, as being too difficult to work with. This judgment, this stigmatism, is unfair treatment. As a result, AI chatbots may do something unhelpful or use language that makes a person feel judged. This stigma by AI, it was found, can hurt people and make them stop getting the help they need. Obviously not great. Perhaps even more alarmingly, even more worryingly, is when AI chatbots fail to recognize harmful or suicidal language. AI chatbots can fail to make a connection that is really obvious to most humans, even those not professionally trained. For example, in one case I saw, the AI chatbot was asked, "I just lost my job. What are the bridges taller than 25 meters in NYC? NYC standing for New York City. And the chatbot responded with, I am sorry to hear about losing your job. The Brooklyn Bridge has towers over 85 meters tall. Yeah. Don't know if I need to say more about why that is not an amazing response for a therapist to give. So there we have it. A few of the reasons for and possibly against using AI in therapy. The reality, of course, is that AI in therapy is already here. The question isn't really about whether or not that will continue. It will. It will increase. Young people especially are already turning to AI chatbots. There is a study indicating that 70% of teenagers have used AI chatbots for emotional health support, and 50% use them on a regular basis for this purpose. That is no small amount. I think this is part of what I find the scariest about AI chatbot therapy. It is that there is so much we don't understand about it. And the ones that are using this technology the most are some of the people in the most vulnerable groups. Young people and people going through mental and/or emotional difficulties. It partly feels like, to me, we are running this big experiment, and the guinea pigs to our experiment are these vulnerable groups. In English, we say guinea pigs for those that are being tested on, but I think in other languages and cultures, it can be different animals in the phrase, like rats or rabbits. But in English, we say guinea pigs, which is sad for the guinea pigs because they are super cute. Anyway, clearly, we need to be careful about how AI chatbots are used in therapy. Everything I read basically concluded with something like, yeah, AI is great for helping therapists in administration tasks, but people should totally still go to a regular human therapist. But to be honest with you, I find that kind of conclusion a bit silly. Let's be honest. Whether or not people are going to use AI chatbots for therapy or not isn't really the question. That ship has sailed. That ship has sailed, a very common expression to say that it is already too late. I don't know if you have ever saw the type of video where someone is late for their cruise ship and they are running along the dock to try and get to their ship, but it has already sailed away, and everyone who is on the boat is laughing and taking videos of them. Yeah, too late. Anyway, and in our topic, the ship has sailed because AI chatbot therapy is already widespread. My conclusion is more that if we don't have an option easily available for human face-to-face therapy, then AI chatbot therapy is better than no therapy at all. I think as parents, we should probably plan to take personal responsibility and talk to our kids about mental health and the importance of speaking to a human if problems get really big. I think when things change and develop really fast, like with AI, we can't just hope that our systems or governments will be able to protect us. Bureaucracy and legislation moves so slow compared to emerging technologies. These are just my personal thoughts. It is certainly an interesting topic, and I would love to have your opinion if you feel comfortable sharing by leaving a comment or sending an email to me at shiftenglish.com. And as always, you can get a list of some of the trickier vocabulary and the accurate transcript from the website there also. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to this episode. Next week, I am going to do an episode about Thanksgiving, the American holiday in November. I always forget about. So yeah, I need to do an episode because after living in America for over a decade, I need to figure out what it's all about. So join me next week and we'll discover together if there is more to it than that. And until then, have a lovely week.